it starts going well. That's the part that's hardest to explain from the outside and hardest to admit from the inside. The connection is real. The warmth is there. Something is forming between two people that has the specific texture of matching, of this person, this relationship, becoming genuinely important. And then something shifts. The texts slow down. The availability decreases. The energy that was present becomes, incrementally, harder to access. Plans get made and quietly unmade. The warmth that was there starts to pull back without a clear event to point to, without a conversation that explains it, without anything that would satisfy the question the other person is inevitably going to ask. What happened? And from the outside, it looks like indifference. Like the person was never that interested to begin with. Like they got what they wanted and left. From the inside, it feels like something else entirely. Because the person who is disappearing is often not indifferent. They're often the opposite of indifferent. And the disappearance isn't happening because they don't care, it's happening in many cases precisely because they do. And that's the part that doesn't make sense from the outside. That the exit and the caring can exist in the same person, in the same moment, pointed in the same direction. But they can.
And here's why.
Kim Bartholomew at Simon Fraser University, building on decades of attachment research, identified what she described as a fearful avoidant attachment style, a pattern characterized by a simultaneous desire for and fear of closeness. People in this pattern want connection. They feel the pull of it, sometimes strongly. And they also experience the approach of real intimacy as genuinely threatening, not as an intellectual concern, but as a visceral, nervous system-level alarm. The closer the relationship gets, the louder the alarm. And the exit, the pulling back, the disappearing, the gradual or sudden reduction in presence, is the nervous system's response to that alarm. Not a decision exactly. More like a fire door that opens automatically when the heat gets high enough. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being needed by many people. You're surrounded. Your phone is full of conversations. People count on you. And you still go to sleep at night, feeling like no one really sees you. Not because they're bad people, but because they've only ever needed you, not really known you. I've written about this kind of loneliness. Link in the description and first pinned comment. Philip Shaver at the University of California, Davis, whose research on adult attachment has shaped the field for decades, documented how the attachment patterns formed in early childhood don't stay in childhood. They travel into friendships, into romantic relationships, into every context where closeness becomes possible. For the person with fearful avoidant tendencies, the pattern is consistent. Desire for connection, movement toward it, then at a certain threshold of actual intimacy, a pull in the other direction. That threshold is the moment when being seen becomes possible. And being seen fully by someone who could then choose to leave is experienced not as an opportunity, but as a threat. The logic underneath it is specific. It goes something like this. The closer someone gets to knowing you, the real version, not the managed version, the more power they have to confirm what you've always feared about yourself. And the more they know you, the worse the loss would be if they leave. So the math the nervous system does, over and over, without consulting the conscious mind that is genuinely trying to connect, is, the closer this gets, the more dangerous it is. And the safest response to danger is distance. The disappearance is a preemptive strike. Leave before the inevitable loss becomes real. Exit before being seen completely, because being seen completely and then abandoned would be the thing that confirms what you are most afraid of. But here's the cost that almost never gets acknowledged, the one the disappearing person carries alone. The exit doesn't protect them from loss. It just changes its shape. Instead of losing the relationship at the moment of rejection or abandonment, which was the loss they were protecting against, they lose it earlier, before it could have become what it was heading toward, before they could find out whether the fear was accurate, before they got the one piece of evidence that would have mattered, that someone, knowing them well, chose to stay. And because they exited before that could happen, the fear remains intact. Uncontested. No counter-evidence. Just the accumulated record of relationships that ended, some by the other person, some by them, but all of them, in the end, confirming the prediction. This is what happens when you let someone close. And there's something else, something that makes this pattern particularly quiet from the inside. Most people who disappear from relationships know they're doing it. They feel it happening and they can't stop it.
They watch themselves pull back.
They know what it looks like to the other person. They feel the guilt of it, the particular guilt of being the one who leaves when nothing went wrong. And they still disappear. Because the fear that drives the exit is not rational, and it doesn't respond to rational counterargument. You cannot think your way out of an alarm that runs beneath thought. You can understand completely that the person on the other side is safe, that the relationship is good, that there is no evidence for the threat the nervous system is responding to, and still feel, in the moments when the closeness crests, that the only available response is to put distance between yourself and it. The exit makes sense. Inside the framework that produced it, it has always made sense. That framework was built in a specific context, one where emotional exposure reliably led to something painful, where being known fully, or needing someone fully, or allowing the closeness to become real produced experiences that the nervous system correctly identified as dangerous. And the nervous system, which is an extraordinarily competent learner, built a response to that. When closeness approaches, create distance. The problem is not the response. The problem is the context it's being applied in, which is, in most adult relationships, nothing like the original. But the alarm doesn't check the current context. It fires at the same temperature it fired at in the room where it was first calibrated. And the person who wants nothing more than to stay, who is, at the moment of disappearing, genuinely mourning the relationship they're in the process of leaving, can't always override the system that is already in motion. The person who disappears from relationships isn't afraid of people. They're afraid of what happens when people see them fully. And after enough exits, there's others, endings that confirm the prediction in all its variations. They've stopped being able to tell which outcome scares them more. Being known and then left. Or being known and then stayed with. Both possibilities carry something that feels like risk. And that's the specific trap the pattern creates. Because the exit protects against one kind of loss, the loss of being known and then left, but it cannot protect against the other kind. The loss of the relationship before it could have become real. The loss of the counter-evidence that would have told the nervous system something it has never been given enough of. That closeness is survivable. That being fully seen doesn't inevitably end in abandonment. The exit, paradoxically, maintains the very belief it was designed to protect against. Every time someone disappears from a relationship before it can reach full depth, the record stays unchanged. No relationship deep enough to test the fear. No experience of being completely known by someone who chose to stay. And so the prediction, if I let this get close, I will be hurt, remains unchallenged. Intact. Running. The person who disappears from relationships is not avoiding love. They're avoiding the specific, terrifying moment that follows. The moment when love is given access to all of them, and they have to wait to find out what it will do with what it finds. That moment is the only thing that changes this. And it cannot happen from a distance. And what makes staying possible when every instinct is pulling toward the exit is worth understanding in specific terms. It's not courage, usually. Or, at least not courage in the form most people would recognize. It's something quieter. The accumulation of evidence that the alarm was wrong before. That the prediction, if I let this get close, I will be hurt, was tested once or twice, or gradually, in small moments rather than large ones, and the predicted outcome didn't follow. That the nervous system, running the exit protocol at the approach of real closeness, was operating on information that was accurate once, and is no longer current. Philip Shaver's adult attachment research identifies something specific about how people with fearful avoidant tendencies shift over time, and it's almost never sudden. It happens in relationships that are consistent enough and patient enough with the disappearance patterns to remain available through multiple exits. Relationships that survive the pulling back without interpreting it as abandonment, without responding with the withdrawal or retaliation that the original attachment environment would have produced. Kim Bartholomew's work frames it this way. What the fearful avoidant person needs is not a relationship that never triggers the alarm. It's a relationship that holds steady when the alarm fires and the exit begins, and is still there when it passes. Not because the other person is inexhaustible or unaffected, but because they understand, at some level, what the pulling back actually means. That it isn't indifference. that it is, in its own complicated way, a form of caring from someone who doesn't yet know how to stay. Learning to stay is possible, but it starts not with decision. It starts with finding someone for whom staying feels like a risk worth taking, and then testing one small moment at a time that the risk doesn't do what the history has always predicted it would. The moment it starts to change doesn't look like what you'd expect. It doesn't feel like courage. It usually just feels like being too tired to keep doing it the old way. That's enough. Tired is enough. I've written about what to do with that feeling before it passes and you go back to the old pattern. Link in the description and first pinned comment. Now I want to ask you something directly. Think about the last time you felt yourself pulling back, not because something went wrong, but because something was going right. Not because the person gave you a reason to leave, but because the relationship was becoming real enough that leaving started to feel necessary. What did that feel like in the moment? Was there a specific threshold, a conversation, a moment of genuine closeness, where something shifted? Where the warmth that had felt safe suddenly felt like too much? And then, what did you tell yourself to explain it? That you'd been getting too attached, that you needed space, that the relationship was moving too fast, or that you'd realized it wasn't what you thought, or any of the other things the mind produces when the nervous system is running an exit sequence it can't yet name. And then the harder question, what do you think would have happened if you'd stayed? Not in theory. Specifically, if you had tolerated the closeness for just a little longer, past the point where the alarm was loudest, what do you actually believe would have been on the other side? For many people in this pattern, the honest answer is that they don't know, because they've never gotten there. Every time the closeness crested, the exit arrived before the answer could. And that not knowing is exactly the gap the fear lives in. You can't find out whether closeness is survivable without staying long enough to find out. That's the only way. Not by convincing yourself the fear is irrational. It isn't exactly. It was learned from something real. But by staying, once, past the moment the alarm fires. By letting the closeness become what it was heading toward and discovering, in real time, what actually happens. The answer might surprise you. And even if it doesn't, even if the specific relationship doesn't work out, the experience of having stayed will give you something the exits never can. Evidence. Counter-evidence. A different data point for the nervous system that has been running on the same old information for a long time. If something in this video found you today, leave a comment. Tell me what pulling back has cost you. I read everything. Subscribe if you haven't, because the next video goes into what lives underneath all of this. The pattern that formed earliest. The one that set the terms for everything that came after.